everybody, and welcome to Crushing Comics. I'm your host, Peter, also known in most corners of the internet as Crisis with a K. And I'm here with two of my favorite mutants from around the world, Tyler and Fariha. Tyler, where do you land on the plumage versus tassels debate? Do you have a personal preference?
I would say feather, which means it's plumage.
I think it's plumage if it's all feathers. Yeah. And then, Fariha, how did your last family vacation with mom and dad go? Any alien invasions repelled on that one?
It was fine. We were having a lot of fun. But I think when mom and dad came back, they were infected by aliens. And I think they still are. And I'm concerned. I don't know what to say.
Well,
like my dad says that everything's okay, but it's not.
Are they always smiling?
Yes, like this. Which is weird, you guys.
Well,
but
look,
anyway.
if that's not enough of a hint, this is our full spoilers look at the X issues of the week, which this week is Hellions number 5, New Mutants 13, and Cable number 5. So if you have not read them and you want to be surprised by them, and oh boy, were they surprising, you need to stop watching this video now. But if you're ready to go on this journey with us, we're ready to go on it with you and talk about these chapters of X of Swords. So as always, we're going to do a quick roundtable to talk about our first impressions, and then we're going to dig into what happened in these issues, both a little bit of a dig into the continuity and a little bit of the dig into, how do we think this plot and this creative team choices are unfurling. So let's go to Fariha first. Fariha, how did you feel on the whole, lightning round, about these 3 issues?
This was one of the best week. I feel like, on not just on like X of Swords or 10 of Swords, but I think like, all of Docs, this has been a really good one because all 3 across the board was fantastic. And I cannot wait to talk about them.
Yeah. Tyler, thoughts?
I agree completely. I mean, not just the writing, the art is really, really good too. So, all 3, the writing, the art, and the compelling stories in all 3 issues makes this the best week in DOX so far. No doubt about it.
Well, I have to say, we all know that I keep an intense database of every comic that I read with ratings and release dates and things, and I had to triple check. But this is my top-rated week of X-Men comic books in the past half decade. I thought they were incredibly delightful. I think they were funny when they needed to be funny and dramatic when they needed to be dramatic. And I do think that we've seen the birth of perhaps one of the new best art teams in comics on one of these. And I think that it's really delightful to see the other 2 artists up against each other because they're very similar, and it was just a real treat. So I'll dig. Yeah. I have a lot to say about art this week, but this might be the most positive version of this program that you, the audience, will ever listen to or hear, because I can't imagine we're ever going to come out as positive on a week as we did on this one.
I mean, I'm going to balance it out a little bit by nitpicking things apart. So it's really nitpicking things apart so that you get a little bit of the negative, if you will.
Right, and I feel like anytime when all the issues are really good or all the issues are really bad, I feel like our energy level kind of matches that. And last week's issues were kind of in the middle ground.
They were middle groundish.
They're middle ground, and we were also kind of in the middle ground in terms of our enthusiasm. So this week, I can tell there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah, if you can't feel it already, we're a little bit more manic and buzzing.
We're buzzing. Like our plumages are like flying all over the place.
Oh my gosh.
It's so much.
So look, let's jump right into this first issue of the 3, which is Hellions number 5. Hellions has been by Zeb Wells. Zeb Wells has written in the X-Men universe before. He wrote New Mutants back in 2010, and he's been gone for a while, and he tends to drop in and write some Spider-Man books. Sometimes he's a very good Spider-Man writer, but here we are in Hellions, and it starts out with a resurrection scene that mirrors the resurrection scene that we saw back in the beginning of House of X, except for this time the person being resurrected is Empath, and he is the opposite of empathetic. He doesn't care about who brought him back or if it was a good thing or a bad thing or like that Hope and Xavier are trying to help him. He's like, F this noise, screw you all. Obviously, it's fun to see an obnoxious character like this be obnoxious and also be treated badly because he's so obnoxious. But is it anything more than funny? Is there another level to Hellion here, or is it just a gag?
So I told last week that, I have a lot of thoughts about Hellions, and one of the things I just don't understand why they're resurrected so fast, because they're so bad, terrible mutants. Like, why would they do that? Because there's I'm pretty sure there are millions of mutants still not not brought back, and they're just brought back because they died in action, and even that was just a whatever. Why are we doing this?
They're almost more of a Black Ops team than the Black Ops team of X-Force. So you almost have to wonder how did they get in line for resurrection? Did Sinister make a deal? Because it doesn't seem like somebody that, even before this whole no egg situation, which clearly the opening scene here is before, it doesn't seem like Empath and the other Hellions should be really high on the list. Really.
And I think that kind of the scene was hilarious because I really enjoy it when people really bitch talk to Professor X, and this was one of those whatever, who the F are you? I don't like this, and where's my why people are not shouting my name.
Right, and, where's my ceremony? And it's almost like Professor Oz, I don't even have time to explain that nobody is going to receive you.
Right.
And this is the first time someone fling go balls juice on his face, right? After being resurrected.
Right, so it's so there was a lot of fun elements to it, but at the back of my mind, I was thinking, if I was a mutant and I'm waiting for my loved ones to come back, and I hear that, Empath was resurrected, I would have some, I would be in that middle of that quiet council and giving a lot of my mind. No. And then I would also play the Reis card. It's is he brought back because he's white and, blonde?
And blonde.
What's up?
No coincidence that the first mission is something that Sinister benefits from hugely, which was taking his old clones off the map and tidying some things up for him. So it's almost like Sinister has leveraged the fact that he's in this position of power, and he is, let's not forget, the one who's supplying the genetic information that's allowing the resurrection process to take place, that he kind of has found his own leeway to get what he wants. And as we roll into the Quiet Council scene, it's all about Sinister trying to get what he wants, because he's I think my people should go in and maybe, interfere with this, which, let's just take it as face. It's a good plan, right? Why let the other side get their swords? If we can prevent even one of them from getting a sword, it's a default. It's kind of what I was saying about Wolverine and Solemn last week, but we agreed they had a gentleman's agreement. Sinister, no gentleman, as we know, is basically let's get in there and mess some stuff up, but clearly he has an ulterior motive, which we're not exactly aware of. But to kind of wrap up this part of it, he gets played because he gets the people on the Quiet Council to vote in favor of his team going, but then because he is terrible, they vote in favor of him having to go with his team into the unresurrectable land of the other world. I was scream cackling through this scene. It was the most delicious scene. But please talk first, and then we'll come back to me.
No, I mean, it's not just because he is a bad person that the rest voted him in. The rest, I mean, he doesn't have enough votes, for him to go in initially. But he poked the bear. He keep poking Magneto, and it's
your daughter is a bad influence in my havoc. Yeah, my Summers brother.
I think that's the part.
So, can I request to someone, either Hickman or whatever, whoever's listening, is that the powers be, can we get a Quiet Council series where it's just them just bickering the whole time. Like every issue, every page is just them bickering. As of now, I don't think there was a single Quiet Council scene that was not hilarious. Like, I don't recall one, and this is no exception. And then it started off with like the whole plumage versus tassel.
Oh my gosh.
Like, which one is it?
I mean, in terms of throwing stones from glass houses, Exodus, who has this whole like, I don't even know, like Renaissance portrait framing thing that just hangs behind his head. For him to be the one to make a comment to Sinister is just beyond. Right. Like and he doesn't stand on the platform of totally safe fashion choices. Let's just say that.
I mean, and it is a very sexy cape. We talked about it before.
Last week we called it one of our favorite costumes in all of comics.
Right.
The shredded cape. Yeah.
So the thing is like, and then so it started off with that. But the thing is, my favorite scene was like, and I'm going to use it in a meeting. I'm just waiting for the perfect moment for that Sinister says that Emma loves this idea. Someone tell her face that she does. Like, because her face was not saying, like, kind of reflecting. She was just looking on kind of rather disgustingly. But then she was like, And then it's like, Emma loves this idea. I'm just now waiting for my time to actually use this. And because of that, I'm going to be requiring all my team meetings, everyone to show their videos. Because then I can use this joke. I'm just like, I just laughed at it for so long. I don't think I ever laughed at like an X-Men book this much.
Well, and also it carries
was just
like
so good.
It carries like the subtext of like, you should smile more a little bit. Like Sinister can be very patriarchal and very talking down to just about anybody. It doesn't really matter if they're men or they're women.
Equal
or
opportunity.
Whatever. Right. Equal opportunity, hegemony and patriarchy from Sinister. But it definitely, like, to have the guts to say something like that to Emma, to me, just made it funnier. Because, like, most other people would never make a comment like that to him. But he just is so blasé in how he addresses the whole world. And to me, this is like well-written, funny Sinister. Like, I liked him when he was scarier. I think he was meant to be the representation of childhood trauma, and he used to be really scary, but Gillen, God bless him, took us on this journey to hilarious Sinister back in the beginning of the second volume of Uncanny X-Men, and here we are. But this version of him, where he just blithely disregards everybody's opinion and assumes that he's right, I find that funnier than when it's just like joke, because it's more consistent to who he is. He does think he's right all the time.
Yeah.
And
I mean, go ahead.
And no, I'm just saying he is right. It's a plumage, not a task. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm just still.
Is it plumage? Plumage of what? Whose feathers are they? How is it plumage? Do I have to look at the definition of plumage?
I don't know. It's beaks, probably. He probably raised some mutant and then plucked feathers out of them and then put them in his cave. I don't know.
So plumage technically is a bird's feathers collectively.
Exactly.
And the example that Google has granted me is the male is in full breeding plumage.
Exactly. And then, it was like a lot of feathers. Sorry. This is the last time I'm going to talk about it.
No, I think it's going to keep coming up, actually, because it's is pretty much the start of the issue. The output of the Quiet Council is Sinister can have his mission, and they agree that they're all potentially going to die, but only if Sinister leads it. Sinister makes a big deal that he doesn't want to in the moment. But a few scenes later, we are reminded that Sinister pretty much has his own resurrection process. And so he's never truly at risk. There is, of course, the personal narcissism of whoever the main Sinister is at any given time, not wanting to be a Sinister who dies. But it's not like Mr. Sinister's gonna go away. I actually question if he would even allow himself to be resurrected in one of the eggs or not, honestly.
Probably not, and doesn't need to. Like, he doesn't need to. So
he would
why?
be like, get your filthy egg away from me. Much like Hellions, much like Empath.
Right. But the thing, so my thing was, though, it's like, why did they all agree to his plan? Because I just don't, I don't get it, because the thing is, the team that he has are so incompetent. Why the Quiet, it's mostly incompetent. I mean, I'm sorry, they just don't work well together, and we have seen it before. So why the Quiet Council said okay to this, not the X-Force? I'm a little confused by that.
Tyler, do you have any thoughts there?
The only people, the people who agreed to it was Emma, Mystic, Exodus, and Sebastian Shaw, and of course Sinister himself. So all these people are really not X-Men.
So my question.
I mean,
so my
with the
question.
exception of Emma, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right. So my question to that is like, was it because they just wanted him out of the way, and then this was an easy way to get rid of him?
Well,
They
I think I would say from Emma's point of view is like you can sacrifice them. I don't care, you know, but I don't want to sacrifice important people. So these are the people that, you know, they are sacrificial lambs. If they come back different, so be it. I don't care.
No, but I get that. But the thing is, like, if they mess up there and Saturdine finds out, she's going to make them forfeit the competition, and thus Krakoa will be in danger. So why, so why allow these, like, you know, insane people to carry out this mission? Isn't it a lot of more risk?
I mean, I ultimately think that, again, the difference in small degrees, but first of all, sometimes you have to just have plot conveniences for a story to be funny, right?
Right.
Right. But I do think if we want to try to justify it in story, it's like they've made sure that Sinister specifically has a team of people who are all fundamentally broken. I mean, if we look at it, you have Quanon, who's now Psylocke, who's been living the idea of being body snatched for years and resurrected repeatedly. You know, Havoc, who, you know, had all of his Maddie Pryor stuff, but then died in X Factor, came back, was sent to space to die, came back, was sent to the future to die in Uncanny X Avengers, came back. You know, Nanny, who's this psychotic scientist who thinks she has to forcibly adopt every mutant. Like, I can go on, but these are all broken characters who fundamentally have identity problems to begin with. It's almost like the whole theme of the book is characters with identity problems. And I think that gives this like a different level of deniability for Krakoa than X-Force, which are clearly the Black Ops mutants. Like, these people can barely hold a conversation with each other. So how deniable are they really as a group? Like, pretty deniable. So I think that there's kind of like plot contrivance reasons that it's just fun, so just let them go and do it. But I also, the way I've been justifying it to myself is like, Sinister's a wild card anyway. Let him do whatever he wants to do. Like, if, like, all these people were resurrected just because they were. Nobody's going to jump to put them in the front of the line or grieve too hard. They're specifically the outcasts.
Yeah.
I feel like Scott will care about
Havoc, maybe.
Yeah,
but it almost feels like this title maybe could have been the second arc to Fallen Angels. Like, this Fallen Angels would apply really well to this team, but like Fallen Angels just did so poorly and had such negative reception, and there was going to be a writer change anyway, that they were like, let's call it Hellions. But I do think it kind of like extends this idea of like who's forgotten and who's left behind, personally.
Okay.
I don't know.
I can take that.
Thoughts on that?
No, I really like this idea, but I was thinking that it would make more sense if they just kind of said no, and then had that,
and then they kind of went on their own.
Yeah, they went on their own because Exodus pushed him. Like, you know, Exodus pushed Sinister into like, oh, I think you should still go, you know? Because wouldn't that be a little bit more deniability? Like, you know, I was kind of thinking it will go that way, but then it's like, oh, okay, sure.
And we're going to get into Exodus just a little bit more when we get into New Mutants, because I know I and I think Tyler have a lot to say about that. But so we've talked about Exodus and how Magneto's the tipping vote. Let's talk a little bit more about this Sinister scene, right? So we know that he can resurrect himself, and this is kind of one of these broadly played for comedy moments. Yeah. But like, is it more than, again, just like with Empath, is it more than a gag? Is there something here, or is it just a couple of pages of comedy?
I mean, part of it, and this is going to be one of my nitpick, is that how could he operate a clone farm on Krakoa without Krakoa knowing?
Well, it's at Bar Sinister. Isn't that a different island?
No, Bar Sinister, I think, is part of Krakoa.
We got to review the maps.
Yeah, I believe that's the case, because I think there is a Krakoa Bar Sinister area.
All right.
So...
But I feel like no, go ahead, sorry.
No, I said that was the part which I kind of want to nitpick. And also I find that, is this something that Xavier and Magneto actually allowed? You know, they are like just closing one blind eye to it because they know he's going to be doing some things, you know, with some knowledge from Moira, in her previous lives. So they just let him do his thing, let him think that it is something that's secret, and and that when they need to, they can stop it or they can push it further, depending on how the whole story develops.
So the way I kind of looked at it is because just to show as like a bullet, like a Chekhov's gun kind of way, that Sinister has a different way of reviving himself. Like, he has another way of, and he's beyond that. And I think, like, to your point, what you were saying, that why Krakoa allows it, I don't know whether Bar Sinister is in Krakoa or not. I feel like
it is. I did just bring up the map.
So it is. And I think it's because Krakoa really doesn't care about a lot of things, I feel. Like, I think, like, it just allows these mutants to be living there. But the thing is, like, it's not, like, it just kind of, like, I don't care what they do, like, because it didn't say anything about all Shaw and whatever, all the nonsense that he was up to. Like, didn't necessarily, like, because I'm pretty sure Krakoa listens to all the conversations that happen. So, why not give all of those away? Because Krakoa really doesn't care.
Well, and I think that this also naturally relates to, like, as comic fans, especially as X-Men fans, people tend to really like rules. Like, they read something working a certain way in the comic book, and they're like, well, this is the rule now, right? Like, resurrections work like this now. Wolverine, when Wolverine got brought back in House of X, we all said, why can he have his adamantium back? And then they revealed the 5, and Proteus was there, and we said, because there's reality warpers. Like, we all love rules. And I think that it's one of these things where, like, if we try to force the whole world to snap into rules, sometimes we don't get kind of moments that are interesting or moments that can shock us. And so is Bar Sinister on Krakoa? Yes, which I didn't realize as I was reading. So clearly I didn't dig into it that much. And, like, technically is probably Krakoa somehow aware of everything that's going on the island? Yes. But, like, to remove Sinister's ability to be ridiculous and to have clones of himself removes a huge variable from the plot. So, like, at some point, do you have to make the rules subservient to the ability to make the plot interesting, right? Like, for the same reason of, Nanny, why, I don't know, if I forget if she ever died, but, like, why is she still in an egg? Why doesn't she do the combat with Apocalypse and come back not in the egg, right? But in the same way that we have characters who have physical modifications to their body, whether they're injuries or not, that they're maintained through resurrections. Like, Cyclops technically only has to wear a visor because he had head trauma as a child. Yeah. And he can't control his ruby gem, beams. And yet he still has a visor on. And it's, we could have a huge philosophical discussion about, because, right. But, we could have a huge philosophical discussion about, like, why wouldn't they bring him back without the head trauma? What's the story there? But the story's only interesting to tell if it's interesting. And I just feel like it's more interesting to have Bar Sinister there than it is to wonder why it should be allowed there. And maybe we'll get that, maybe we won't, but that's why I was interested in your takes on it, because I think it's kind of one of these things that you have to give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt, or else everything becomes too prescribed.
Right. But the thing is, like, I feel like with the Nanny's one, I don't think she knows about the resurrection thing, because I feel like she just found out, that
there was a scene in the first arc.
Yeah, like, I think she recently found out, and
I think she said something like reborn or something.
Yeah, so I think it's just, and then even here, because Sinister actually explains to them that, resurrection is currently off when it comes back, and then there was, like, some discussion that, how does that work and stuff. So I don't think Nanny actually knows what's
I did not pick up on that.
Yeah, like, she doesn't know. I mean, come on, who likes to be in an egg? Somebody on Twitter, so fun story. A couple of weeks ago, Fariha, as she was starting to read Hellions, was like, who are these people? Like, what is going on here? So we put out the call, Tyler and I, on Twitter, for people to explain each cast member of Hellions in one tweet, if they possibly could. And somebody came through with, like, Nanny's origin kind of page, and I had actually forgotten that she was sealed in the egg. Like, she was a person at one point, and she was put into the egg. Why?
It's kind of like a Dr. Doom, Tin Man, like.
To be honest, I could not for the life of me figure out why an egg. Why not an Iron Maiden
it's
or
late
something?
Stage Claremont, and it's ridiculous.
I was
no, it's not Claremont. It was Simonson.
Simonson?
Yes, it
Yeah,
was.
it's just
She first appeared in X Factor, so I think Simonson was the one who wrote that.
So look, the final gag is before we get into Otherworld. Gosh, we got to keep this moving. Is Empath is back, right? And he's basically just back to abuse the team even more, which nobody seems to have any control over. Like they could have just left him behind, but no. Like I guess he's on the team, but it winds up paying off because they do need to do some convincing of people in Otherworld, and it kind of sets up this Grey Crow Empath face off, and we're not done because he makes Krakoa into a pet. Like that's gonna come back to hurt him pretty soon.
Definitely.
Another.
I mean, we have to talk a little bit about how Offer Maker is like playing the whole role of like a hero going to a sword quest because he doesn't carry a sword normally, right? And in this issue, he has a sword with him and a gigantic sword too, hanging on his side. And how he was like, oh, what, Grey Cow, not understanding. I mean, he's literally a 5-year-old.
And I think a lot of people just write him as like Nanny's little like flying monkey to do as she commands.
Correct.
But Wells has been making sure to write him a little bit more with this childlike sense of wonder, which is like really in opposition to the situations that he's being put in, which actually gives this book a little bit of its like horrific bent. Like there's a child on this team, you know?
I know. I mean, he's... And then,
I actually I can't kind of speak to these characters because this is like the first time I'm actually experiencing them, but my god, each one of them is like more horrible than the next one. And I'm not saying the horrible in the sense that the character themselves, but the specific surroundings around them or whatever they're going through. It's just like like if I were Havoc, I would really try to distance myself from that very fast. Like I feel for Havoc, and I don't care for him, by the way, but I'm caring for him more. I'm like, like no, please no. But we shouldn't go too fast without talking about Sinister versus Sinister because who won? I didn't get that.
Whoever winds up with the cape. I don't know. Is it the new one or the old one? Youth before beauty or what?
Like which one won? And then also like
who won. Why is the person who won going to the mission? That was a confusing part too.
That's true.
Because they say winners takes a cape, right? And then the winners is the
also
one wearing the cape.
Also won the one wearing the cape in there. So that's why I didn't understand what was the rule and who won.
Right, because now that you say it, if the winner kept the cape, but he was trying to send the newbie to there. There's something going on there.
So what happened?
And so the final Sinister confrontation sort of is him versus Jamie Braddock. Now, Jamie Braddock has always been unstable, and he's always been portrayed as a little bit of a weirdo, and now he's in charge of one of these otherworld kingdoms, and it's a really interesting scene to see him and Sinister kind of manipulating each other back and forth. Like Sinister's like, I know all about your predilections, but then Jamie manipulates him back because he wants the cape and he wants to get rid of the horse, and it's like just putting two totally insane tyrants next to each other just for comedic effect. This was probably the part that was the weakest to me because I think that Jamie, while he is ridiculous, is incredibly deadly, and I've lost that a little bit in the kind of Teeny Howard version of him that we've gotten in Excalibur so far. So I had to wince a little bit here. Like, we didn't really get any of his true madness here. He kind of was just another haha jokey character. So if I have one negative about this issue, it's probably that for me. But that's as somebody with a long Excalibur history who's familiar with the character. So Fariha, Jamie is totally new to you other than Excalibur. How does he read to you here?
So I thought that he was just trying to get rid of that horse. And I thought that was very clever, though, because the way he got rid of it, and then it was actually a problem. But see, that's the thing, because I found Excalibur to be a little bit boring, so I really didn't pay attention, and I should have. And, I don't know.
And now look where you are.
I know. Now look at it. It's like, I'm just like, just the last minute. Like, I probably would like end up in a Hellion if I were in Krakoa because I don't pay attention to things. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like, I was like, okay, like, you're just like, it was just another fun scene for me. But the thing is like, why is he still there and whose side is he on? Because he's not for Krakoa. It doesn't seem like it, and he just being there, being insane, and I don't know if I like.
He's never been much for mutants. Like, he doesn't.
And-
he's historically
you
not one
know,
that cares a whole lot about this
not-
whole mutant business.
Not to be political in this, but the thing is, like, we do have a Jamie Braddock currently in power, so it just doesn't feel hilarious anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's like,
But I mean, he's deadly. I mean, in his previous appearance, like Peter said, he's a real villain. So and he's powerful. I mean, he's a pretty big reality warper.
Well, he's
I
one
mean,
of the few Omega mutants left, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he did bring back Brian when he died.
Without making it too currently political, although I'm happy to go there on this channel and people should understand that, but without having to make it too specifically currently political, I think that in the 3 parts of this issue and the different conflicts we see Sinister in, we're really looking at the different ways that kind of laissez-faire rule gets applied, right? Here we are with, mutants have their own of democracy, more or less, with the Quiet Council, even though we could probably give it a more specific name. And there's no challenge to the rule, right? And everybody's kind of allowed to do what they want to do, except for the 3 big rules of being mutants that we learned at the end of Powers of X and House of X, with only a few sub-rules kind of coming into place. And this issue, even though it's super funny, actually seems like it's starting to dig into, well, what does it look like now that we've removed all the oppression and all of the structure from mutants for other people's rules? What does it begin to look like, right? So the Quiet Council we see, which is supposed to be this august voting body, very quickly kind of descends into anarchy and backstabbing, even though they're supposed to be the ones that are directing this whole race. We have Sinister, who's basically flouting every possible rule of resurrection, and there's 0 consequences. Like, he's not getting put in the pit because he's not killing any humans, and he's actually helping with Make More Mutants, so there's nothing wrong, right? And then we go to Jamie Braddock, who in many times has been portrayed as somebody who just wants control. The irony being that his power gives him control over all of reality, but he wants like some extra form of control. He wants to be in charge. He wants to be allowed to make whatever madness he wants. And here he is with a crown on his head, and he's like bored, and he's arguing over a horse. So I just think in terms of the whole thing, it's a bit of a farce about what it means to like get what you want, or like to be in power, or to be in power without any checks and balances. Like, it doesn't work. And I think that that's like one of the big themes of Hickman on Krakoa, but we're seeing it in microcosm with Sinister. He can't even come to an agreement with another Sinister. And then we have Jamie, who got all the things that he wants. He rules over a whole kingdom in Otherworld, and he's like critically bored. So I just think that there's actually a really interesting overarching theme here about, getting what you want, and the idea of kind of laissez-faire rule and what that creates in your own society. I don't know. Am I reading way, way too much into this because of the current political climate, or do you think there's something to that?
No, I mean, part of the madness of Jamie can be seen in that particular issue, your favorite issue, Fariha, of Excalibur, right? Where he was randomly creating like a small incursion of like random dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he has been doing. And and I think that's I mean, here I think he's bored because Sachalin has sort of like stepped in and said, hey, everything has to stop now because things are happening in the other world. So he couldn't do anything. Well, except steal her horse and then try to give it away and put the blame on Sinister.
Right, and I think like it kind of also points to like, like I remember once you asked me, Peter, the question that when mutants don't have to fight for their freedom, what do they do? And I think like this kind of comes to that as well. Like, it's like, okay, now everyone got what their hearts desire. Now what? And that's what's happening, because there is nothing more to achieve to these people. So now they're just bored and then resorting to stealing horses. But the thing is, then to that point is like, I think like if Jamie was more in control and not like an insane character, I would have probably like, connect more to, or like, find it more interesting, versus I'm like, okay, yeah, he has no control over his emotion or how he deals with things. So what do you want me, like, what to expect from that? So that's something I'm not too into that.
Yeah, well, I think it's a theme for us to keep an eye on. Both, I do think that Jamie is a Chekhov's gun himself, because we really haven't had a lot of information past that one Excalibur issue where he was setting up alternate realities. That's surely going to come back at some point. And also, I think this overall theme of kind of like decadence leading to fall, right? Like, it's a very kind of like fall of Rome sort of thing, and we've kind of sensed it in the Krakoa society, but it actually seems like it's a pervading theme across like even smaller groups or even separated groups of mutants right now. This is almost the decadent period, right? We're fighting over plumage. We're fighting over capes. This is the decadent period of the role. So look, before we close out this Hellions issue, I have to talk about the art, which is Carmen Carnero and David Curiel on colors. Carnero, I think she is maybe the best artist at Marvel. I know a lot of people love Lara Silva, especially from House of X and Powers of X. There's a lot of great other artists, but there's something about the way she really does facial acting beautifully, amazingly. And then two, the way that she shades always evokes a little tiny hint of Gene Colan for me. She shades and almost kind of painting the shading as a texture. And Gene Colan, very famous Silver Age penciler, and bronze, was known as this person who painted with pencils. But when she gets a really shiny color on her, I think it takes away some of the command. And here we have Curiel, who does not do colors quite as shiny as, say, like a Marta Gracia. And I don't know that there's a bad panel in this issue. I think this is as good looking as a comic book as you can buy from Marvel or DC, like full stop.
Yeah, I mean, from the first page, when I look at the first page, I actually went directly to the credits page to make sure that it's not Pipi Larraz who's drawing it. Because it kind of
look
so
a little
much.
like Larraz. Yeah.
Right.
So then I went back. I was like, oh, who is this person? Oh, she's the one who mentioned that she's going to do the X-Corp book.
The magical disappearing X-Corp book. Yeah. Well, and also, I think Lara sometimes has problems with faces, especially when people are in like mid-battle. Everybody just has the same look, like their jaw has been unhinged and their face has got. And I just think Carnero's like a little bit better at making people's faces look distinct and different. That's just me. But I've always been going back to bat for her hard ever since her first Marvel interior, and I really think she's just something amazing. Freya, any comments on art before we move on?
No, I mean, I like Tyler. I actually thought that this was also Pepe Larraz for a little while, and then I went back and checked. But the thing is, like, I'm super excited to read Captain Marvel that she's doing the interior art for, written by Kelly Thompson. So it was kind of good to see her work a little ahead of time, and then it's beautiful. Like nothing, nothing to complain.
Yeah. Well, anybody who draws a whole issue of Sinister and spends all of that time on his plumage, that is dedicated to their craft. So look, let's move on now to New Mutants number 13, Ed Brison's final issue of New Mutants.
Aww.
As we know, my favorite Dawn of X series against all odds. This is a very singular issue. It's all about the fact that Doug, in combination with Warlock, has been voluntold, as we like to say at my old office, that he is going to be part of this mission. And Magic, who has a long history with Doug, she was on the New Mutants. She joined at pretty much the same time as Doug back in the 80s and already witnessed him die once, pretty much. Realized that this is going to be the end of her friend again, because there's nothing she can do to make Doug as fierce as all of these combatants. There's a couple other themes to touch here, but I think this is the big one, this kind of familial love, tough love, big sister aspect to Magic. Tyler, I know you go way back with these characters. What did you feel about this?
I mean, I think it perfectly encapsulates these two characters, and because Magic has been fighting for herself, for her soul, like, for the longest time, and this particular version of Magic, has to fight even more because she was recreated by Belasco. Like, and I mean, we are not going to go there. Yeah. But
we'll catch Fariha up eventually.
Someday, you guys.
Yeah, but basically, this character has to fight for her soul and herself to maintain, her, right? Her being for the longest time. She's fierce. She's a good fighter. And then you have Doug, who, like Peter said, has died once, and and I feel like in this case, it's like Brisson is basically riding writing to say that, hey, all the other writers are like hate writing you, all the artists hate drawing you because you can't do anything action, and it's just a commentary on how other people view him. And then he also bring up some stuff which I thought was pretty well, maybe not as deep a cut, but it is something that is part of his history, because when he first came back in Ex Necrosha, he was shown that he could fight because he could read body language. So and that was being brought in here. And I don't know. I mean, for Dark, I just kind of like that. His sort of unspoken secondary mutation is to entice people to protect him. Like, I mean, his relationship with Warlock is one, and then his relationship with Krakoa is another one, because it has been shown in these two, I mean, in this issue, that they protect him fiercely.
And all of the original New Mutants have that really. I mean, Rain especially, but all
especially
of them, Cannibal,
yeah.
Danny, they all have a very custodial relationship with Doug.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mention, and then we'll get free. I can't help but go into the continuity hole for just 1 second here. People did hate writing him and drawing him back in the day because he just is like always in the corner of a panel doing nothing. But I really think that the past year has been like the Doug Ramsey renaissance. I feel like we've got writers who are of the age to remember that, like, everybody always treated Kitty as the entry point character into Mutant. And for a lot of people, it was Doug. He was this nerd who, even among the cool people with powers, didn't really have a cool power. And I think that the authors in Dawn of X actually really, like, love him. And I'm always surprised by how much love and support he has on Twitter, because I didn't, like, realize he was that loved, really. And I think this is almost the opposite. Like, in the olden times when he got killed, it was like, finally, Doug's gone. But now it feels like there's this genuine affection for him that was always missing from how he was written before. And, like, I was emotional about this issue. Like, I don't want Doug to die, and I don't think I would have said that 12 months ago.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like, you went from... That's why it's so brilliant this week.
Yes.
Like, you went from one book, which is like all jokes and funny and, and touch on a lot of character bits. And then you come to this one where at the end of it, you're like, oh no, he's going to die.
Yeah, I feel bad.
Yeah.
Doug's a goner.
Yeah.
And not just gone. Like this version of him will be gone.
Forever, right?
Even if they resurrect him. Yeah. I think, and that's why X Factor is important, like that particular chapter. Because without that, you would not feel so much for this particular chapter. And I really loved it. The way it was being set up this way.
Yeah. So I have 3 things I want to talk about, but Freya hasn't had a word in edgewise on us for a while. Freya,
yeah.
How did you feel about Doug here?
So I don't.
Do you
want
to protect him?
Ugh, like. Sorry.
Well,
so the thing is, like, I don't have much history with Doug. Like, I actually first known of him in Charles Soule, Daredevil. Like,
when
that's
he was fighting
his
internet addiction recovery.
Right, that's where I first saw him, and I honestly thought it was a Charles Soule character, but it was a mistake. But anyway, so the thing is, this chapter was important. Like, I really liked it for 2 reasons. Because first, for one, is the first time ever I feel, well, maybe not, that the character trope has been swapped, where the woman is telling the man, dude, you can't fight, you will die. Like, something like that doesn't happen often, because it often is like, oh, little girl, you don't know how to fight.
Or like big burly man to little fragile man. Like, it's definitely a little bit of a reversal to have the captain be the woman. Also still scantily clad. Like, there's a certain amount of power to the fact that Magic is the captain, and she I always say that she's dressed in a sexy way, but she does not use her sex in the way that Emma does.
I know. I think like yeah, but the thing is, like, she's I think she's very, like, she's dressed sexy. Like, that's like to me is like a one of like powerful sexy. That's what I like to call it.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, it's like it's very like, it's not for male gaze only, just because this is how I want to do it, and then with the hair thingies and everything. But anyway, so the thing is, first of all, that was like one of the reasons I really liked it, and second of all, like finally we have that one person in the team who has no idea what they're doing, like, you know, and why they're there, like something that I can relate to. There has been times when I've been part of things where I'm like, why am I here? Or it's like I'm like way overhead, like with all the stuff. A lot of the time I feel like that when I'm talking about X-Men. Like, you know, so the thing is like, so there's this guy, and I think he has one of the coolest power in terms of language, because something that I am fascinated by, like how different language works and stuff like that. And like he can just decipher language, he can create language and stuff like that. And here he is, it's like, you know, the whole thing about pen versus sword, like he's someone who should be like not, like nothing to do with sword, and here he is having to pick up a sword. And there's also, he's having to fight, like you know, I'm thinking that it's very easy to say that I will never go to war, but it comes to for things that I believe in, and if I have to pick up a weapon, I will. And he's kind of going through all of that. I think like it spoke to me. That part of it spoke to me. You know, do I still want to protect him? Maybe not. And, you know, I'm pretty sure he's probably gonna be the one that is going to go. And, you know, we're being set up for that. Like,
it feels like it could be a misdirection to me. Like, it's so obvious that he would be the one that would die. It feels like if somebody else dies protecting him, it's going to be a story we haven't had before, but who knows? I mean, we can only
and that's possible too. Like, you know, it's like because all types of story has been told, so now we're just looking at the combination of something else. So it could be one or the other. But the thing is, like, I was just mostly interested into seeing that aspect of it, and I'm like, thank God that at least one person's like, oh, I don't want to go, but I have to.
Yeah.
So look, I want to bring up a couple of smaller points here. We don't have to dig into them quite as deeply, but one is this idea of violence as language, right? So there's this idea that if Doug watches you fight enough, that he's going to understand your physical language and be able to understand what you're hinting at, feinting, what you're going to do in a fight. But Doug's power is distinctly different from Prodigy's power. Prodigy's power is such that he can understand things by seeing them and then gain that muscle memory and command over his own body as well. Doug doesn't necessarily have that same ability to command his own body. So even, which past writers have played with, as Tyler brought up for a past run of New Mutants, where sometimes in some situations where he knows everybody well enough, he can speak their language of violence well enough to defend himself. And I enjoyed that Brazan very intentionally here plays that beat where he's like, I'm reading your body language, Magic. Aren't I doing great? But then he's like, but I can tell you're not even trying that hard. So Brazan kind of like very neatly referenced that plot point and then kind of swept it aside to say like, that's not Doug's power. So don't send me fan mail if we kill Doug that he should have been able to know that the sword swipe was coming to him. And I just think it's good writing because it didn't feel like a gotcha. It felt like a real character moment that also happened to be a gotcha to remind us that it's not going to save him. And I just thought that's good writing to me. That is good writing.
It is. I mean, the other thing is that he there's this aspect of him where he's like really stubborn. He's like, no, I mean, it has to be me. I can't send anyone else in place of me. You know, like because I want. Well, on one hand, I know I'm going to die. On the other hand, like I can't let someone else take my place, and then maybe, you know, for some miraculous reason, I can prove myself. So I have to do it, you know, and that, I think, you know, you may call it stupid, but I think it plays into his heroic nature because that shows that he's good.
Yeah.
Or he just read too many Steve Rogers book. It's very Captain America.
Scrawny kid does not always get to become Captain America, but
like,
let's talk about
very Captain America. Everything he said over there, I'm like, is this Steve Rogers? Like
Peter really needs to talk about the guy with wings.
Oh yeah.
The wings.
I'm so lost.
No, Exodus with his frame.
Oh yeah. No, I do want to talk about Exodus. So Exodus makes Tyler's point to Doug, basically point by point, as you know, in comic form, and he's like, I could just pop your head right off of your neck right now and take this sword, and it would be better for everybody, and you would still eventually get to come back. I'm less interested in that as a debate between the two of them because I think Tyler just kind of laid it all out for us. And more interested in what is Exodus's role here? He's really the most mysterious member of the Quiet Council. Mm-hmm. He's probably the one of the 12 of them with the least panel time in comics ever. He's been allied both with Apocalypse in the long term and Magneto in the long term, but he's on the like miscellaneous villains part of the council with with Sinister and Mystique. But
Mystique.
Yeah, but in this laissez-faire world, right, where like everybody gets what they want, it kind of feels like Exodus is like already caught on that it's not going to work and you need a little bit of Iron Fist in there in a way that causes him to still venerate Magneto, as we saw in the Empire tie-in for X-Men, because Magneto will still get shit done, right? And Exodus is like, this is what you need to do sometimes as rulers. So I just thought that was really interesting, where Exodus is almost the one of the 12 of them who I trust the most at this point. Not that I wanted him to kill Doug, but like, he seems to be the most rational member of the Quiet Council in some kind of way. Am I totally off base here?
No, I think Exodus is the one, is that cynical reader who is like representing the cynical reader who is like, things are not
me. He's representing me.
Things are not okay, Rhea, do you have anything?
No, I was just gonna say that other than him brainwashing children in the island, which I do not appreciate, like
Pretender.
He's like, finally he's doing something different. Like, I mean, that's I don't know what, like, and that's something I was actually always thinking, that was his deal with getting on all of there, that he's going to get all this young mind that he can brainwash into whatever he wants them to do. And he's kind of doing that over here too. Like, he's trying to tell Doug that, listen, young one, don't, and all that. So I don't know what's his deal, but yeah, he's like, I don't know, Peter, what's your deal? So tell us what's your deal, and then we'll know what's Exodus's deal.
To influence young impressionable minds. No, to have beautiful hair and plumage. Look, I think that it's interesting because I want to tie it to the final thing other than the art that I want to talk about here is Exodus. He's always been very militant, and I think that he's kind of like militantly in favor of mutants winning, even if you have to make tougher choices, in a way that the Quiet Council is proving not to always be willing to do. Mm-hmm. Then on the other side of it, you have Krakoa, who in his own way tries to convince Doug. But in the same way that Exodus is saying, I'm trying to convince you for the true good of all, Krakoa is trying to convince him by saying, doesn't this sovereign land have a say? Like, if you're going to remove the ability of the land to maintain its sovereignty, then can we afford to sacrifice you, even if it's in defense of me? And I think that that's a really interesting beat to play, because Doug ultimately tells him he has to go. But it's kind of like Doug is Krakoa's voice. Like, he's his representation. And you can say all you want about, Xavier will teach somebody else the language mentally or whatever. But, like, does Krakoa still have a voice in these things if Doug dies? Anyone?
I think that's the thing. Like, Krakoa may not have as loud of a voice without Doug. But, like as shown here, he can still take over Mondo. He can still speak
like Quattro
through...
from Total Recall.
Yeah, but he can still speak through Black Tom in some limited ways. So it's not a complete silence, but it may not be an accurate representation, because those two may not be able to communicate. Well, I'm not sure about Mondo, because I think Mondo will be able to communicate because he's talking
Yeah, but Mondo doesn't like it. There's like a whole other sovereignty issue there where Mondo's like, get out of my belly.
Please make it stop.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I recently read, like, I actually love reading World War II books, comics fiction. The reason I'm bringing it up, because I was actually thinking about it from another point of view, is like, what happens when people who can actually work to help the country grow goes to war for the country?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about all those times when doctors, engineers who could have doing other work to protect the people over here were all sent off to war to either make bombs, make, war machines, not the comic version, or sent into the field to patch up soldiers. But the thing is, those people could be in the country to protect the country itself. So I was kind of thinking about it from that point of view, that because after all, he's a linguistic, like he's a translator, and then his mind is more important than his fighting prowess. And then it was kind of coming through from that point of view, that was the point of you going to war and dying when it reduces how good, what the good the country can be.
Yeah, well, and I think that actually brings me to, I think, very, very well stated by you. It brings me to my final of my 3 points, which is Brazan, previously possibly my least favorite regular writer at Marvel, has, in my mind, crafted this very interesting journey in 13 issues of New Mutants, which starts out with the youngest generation going away to spread the good news and ends with the youngest generation being sacrificed to war. And in the middle, it rhymes too. We start with the team as family, with the Hickman arc that Brazan did co-write the first issue of. Mm-hmm. And then with Angel and Beak, we get this idea of former team being literal family, right? And then we have the kind of the young girl whose powers are creating these nightmares. But then we have somebody whose powers have made their own life a nightmare with Glob. This run rhymes. People say writing rhymes. And sometimes it's a thing people just say to say it made internal sense. But I just think there's something very powerful, emotional, and real about what Brazan has taken us on here. And it started with the young people being sent out almost as missionaries, right? Of the good news, share the good news. And now it's ending with 2 of those same people being sent possibly to their death. And it's both from the same culture. The same culture asked them to do these 2 activities, demanded them to do these 2 activities. And here we are.
Yeah.
But isn't that how nation works?
Right.
That's how
real
exactly,
is it, really? To your whole point, you ask people to sacrifice internally in the nation to keep people in good health, to invent things and you reward them, but you're asking them to dedicate their life to that, and then you ask them to dedicate their death to that too. And I just think it's an interesting beat.
And coming from a country where we have to do national service, I mean, I sacrificed 2.5 years of my life to train to be a soldier.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. I had no idea.
Yeah. That's why I'm older by 2.5 years compared
to everybody else. So on those very heavy notes, now let's close out this one by talking about the art. Reis has just a wonderful savage beauty to his style, where it's, he paints across the page in colors, and sometimes it can be tight, sometimes it can be loose. There's definitely a Bill Sienkiewicz aspect to it. I don't know that he's ever drawn a prettier issue than this. And I like he's appointment comics for me. I will always read a Reis issue, but this is as gorgeous as it gets from him. Again, I think just another stunning best in all of comics issue of art from the X of Swords.
No, I agree. I mean, his art is not very tight. It's kind of loose, a little bit loose, but the colors and the emotion and the action that he evokes from his I think his painting is done digitally. So that really, really works very well in this issue.
I also like that it's kind of like a good transition between Carmen Carnero to Phil Noto, and then the bit in between Reis, because I felt like his work was a combined of both. So it just, when you read all 3 back to back, as we did, it just felt like a good, it wasn't transition. A jarring transition. No. It just a soft, so from that point of view, it was a win.
There's this one panel I'm just obsessed with. I'm looking at it on my other screen. It's the really tight on Krakoa's face when Doug is talking to him as a tree. And if you squint at it, it just looks like, my face does. The brow is furrowed. There's some wrinkles. But then if you just, and this hair, but then if you actually dissect it, he does it just with, there's a brown smudge, and then there's a brown smudge, and then there's this little scratchy line. He does so much with such little hints of things. This is not somebody who drew a perfect anatomy of what a face would look like on a tree. He gave us just enough information for our mind to interpret it as a furrowed brow, and I just am fascinated by that. But I think that allows us to talk about the art first on Cable number 5, because I've often said Reis and Noto are like siblings almost. Like they have really similar styles in the way that they paint. Noto's just got a little bit more of like a clean edge to it and a little more refined. Sometimes he has a little bit more of kind of like a 60s throwbacky vibe. Again, I think this Noto issue, one of the most gorgeous issues in all of comics, and I think it should be illegal for anybody but Phil Noto to draw Jean Grey. I think I don't even care if she's in the Marvel Girl outfit. He draws the best Jean Grey in comics right now. Thoughts, opinions? Am I just on a rant at this point?
No, like, so Phil Noto's, one of the things I've noticed is like the eyes. My God, that guy can draw eyes. Like, it's always right there, and that's the first thing you notice. But Phil Noto without a good colorist is absolute horrible.
And this is him coloring himself here.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think he has to either color himself or get a colorist that works with him, because there is another Jerry Duggan book that was actually like him and Phil Noto and Jerry Duggan, an image book, which I could not deal with it. I was like, this is not Phil Noto. Like, it was, because all the sketch lines were still there.
This is a point about something.
Compared to that, this was out of the world.
So again, to give you a little of comic art education, we've mentioned this before, this idea of if a line artist draws a line and then a colorist makes it a color later because they don't want the line of the hair to be black, they want it to be blonde, that's called a color hold, right? And so it's something that Marta Gracia does all the time on Pepe Larraz on Emma Frost's hair. He makes the actual lines in the hair look blonde. That's not how Pepe Larraz probably drew it to begin with. But when you have somebody who draws themselves and is probably doing it in color as they're drawing, like Noto, like Reis, like Steven Sejic, they're just doing it in color to begin with, and there's no like other layer of interpretation, which is why Phil Noto colored by himself looks so different than Phil Noto colored by someone else. And the reason I always notice is the noses. Colorists so often have to like build a nose, like the artist has just put the nostrils in and then they put the gradient on the one side and the gradient on the other side to make it seem nose-like, right? But Noto just draws the nose in color, and I get fixated by his noses. You get fixated by his eyes. I just stare at Phil Noto noses because I think they're real. They look like real people noses. It's fascinating to me. Anyway.
No, I just like the texture.
Yeah.
Of his whole of the way he paints the entire panel. It's just like, I mean, there's the Jim Lee Scott Williams fraction where they do a lot of hexes and extra lines. Here he basically just say, oh, let's darken this portion of it.
Right, it's
let's
almost like
brush.
Watercolor in the background.
Yep.
Like it's totally without lines. Yeah.
So fascinating.
Yeah. Wow. So I mean, just on art alone, you could not do better than these 3 X-Men comic books, is my thesis statement. So this issue, it's much quicker than the other 2. It's pretty much just a horror story, right? This family, this young, adorable family gets deposited on this space station, and they're trying to figure out why Cable got sent there. Let's not lose sight that this was the vision that Cable had to go and execute. And while they're there, they discover something has come through. And first Jean discovers it, then Cyclops discovers it. Cable witnesses it relatively little firsthand. So you get this, both the horror movie trope of like stuff reaching through from the other side, but also the horror movie trope that Cable never witnesses how each confrontation ends firsthand, and neither do we as the reader. So we don't really know what happened with Jean the first time she communicates with them. And if you very carefully look at the panels, we also do not know what happens with Jean and Cyclops at the end.
No.
And I think that is utterly fascinating. So dig in. I know Tyler's a lot to say about this one. Let's start with Tyler and then we'll roll down to Fariha.
Well, I mean, the very first thing is that is in the data page. It took only 9 minutes and 47 seconds for them to overwhelm the entire peak station. And that is very scary for me. I mean, and there were like so many things that, you shouldn't be doing. Do not open a door that has been, welded shut. Why the hell do you want to open it up? There's a reason why they weld it shut. And, that kind of thing. Those horror tropes. And I have to profess, I don't watch horror films because I'm a coward. And I can't sleep after watching it. So, but I do know a little bit here and there. I mean, it is kind of I don't know. I mean, it's really interesting. And then this whole idea of like a virus attacking the entire station, it sounds a little bit like Sublime and Archaea. Sublime, which is the intelligent bacteria that was
Right.
introduced in Morrison's run.
And brought
then-
back in Brian Wood's
Ooh.
run on adjectiveless
X-
X-Men in 2013.
X-Men.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
X-Ladies.
which is also the one that introduced Archaea, which is supposedly his sister, who can interface with biological and technology together, that kind of thing. So, and then of course this one also has a little bit of pointing a little bit to the parasite in Hot Hive, which is one of the province right up in Otherworld. So, and I mean, I don't know. I'm fascinated by. I'm sort of not fascinated. I'm kind of intrigued by how this actually ties into X of Swords.
I know it does feel almost like an interlude, but Dugan very carefully wraps it in the first scene with Cyclops and Magic, which reflects the scene that we just had in
New Mutants.
New Mutants, again with this great connective issue this week, and then also wraps it at the end with him like everything's going to be all right. But it's like, do you totally believe him? It's actually kind of creepy when he says it's all going to be all right at the end. Freya, what is your vibe?
So if your father tells you everything's gonna be all right, everything is not gonna be all right.
That is not a good dad. Dads don't tell the truth
Dads
when
don't
they say
say
that
that.
line. Yeah.
Yeah, dads don't say that. So I can tell you from that point of view. But the thing is, it also reminded me a lot like Alien, the movie, like, in a space which is nothing in there, and then, all of that. I really love that. Love those movies. I don't like Tyler. I'm also a scaredy cat, and I don't like, I like horror movies. I do like space station movies where things are not going right, because it's always kind of, it's very, like, psychologically scary. But the thing is, I wasn't quite like, I think it felt like a setup for something more coming up later. And we know that there's a sword book coming by Al Ewing. So I wasn't sure if this kind of connects to that. I initially thought that the Otherworld version, where, the land where everything goes to die, or like, like a lost reality, is somehow connected to that. And that the opening was like those coming back. But apparently that's not the case. So
The Black Spoke. So
Yeah.
basically, I mean, basically, I think that was the other thing that I thought it sounded like, because they are supposed to, take care of dimensions that are half form, or they are like form singularity that was not done correctly. So they might have deemed that this particular dimension, because of what happened in Secret Wars, is not formed right. So
exactly.
and that ties into Hickman's run.
Right.
Yes, I was thinking about that too. It's like, because all this whole, like, when they were talking about like all the realities that goes to die, or like, the versions. And I was thinking about how much Jamie has connection to that as well. So I got kind of more wrapped up with that. So I was kind of looking for that clue to actually appreciate what's been going on. But yeah, so the thing is, it didn't click to me until Scott says that, oh, everything's gonna be all right. I'm like, oh, no. This is not going to be all right.
Yeah, I think, it read so fast, and I think that there's probably some people who've been following along in X of Swords who were probably disappointed by it, right? Because it's not like super character-oriented to Cable. It's not super a sword quest the way we got in the issues last week. I mean, his sword's there, but he doesn't realize to go on a quest. It's there because he just put it there. So I can see, I've seen some chatter where some people was like, Cable's the weaker one. But I think it's so interesting because it brings in this wild card element of these space creatures, right? And also it's very rereadable, because every time I go back through it, I keep finding different little elements. Like that moment with Jean when she confronts them, it's so strange, right? There's the eyeless man. She looks back into his eyes. He says his piece. He does something to her and says, and now you know, as if she couldn't like read that off of him in his own, he did something additional. Then he puts himself out the airlock, and Jean is shaken when she comes out of the room. And I don't know if I should read that just as shaken because she was just in a decompression event with the airlock, or like shaken because she has this deep realization about them, which she doesn't really tell them. All she says is it murdered everybody on the station, but she doesn't really give them a full readout on what she learned from them. And later she says this might be our only chance to see where they come from. I just really got the vibe that Jean is withholding something here, very similar to the vibe that I got from Mystique on the space station in House of X.
No, I mean that's definitely. I mean, initially, the when I read through it the first pass, I was like, okay, she learned something and she's trying to stop it, and then it got a little bit weird, towards the end, and I don't know. I mean, like, is the whole thing with the two of them stepping through the gate and then talking telepathically to Magic and not the rest of the people seems a little bit off to me too. So I mean that part. I mean, we could read it two ways. On the surface, they defeated everything. They came back,
right? Yeah, hooray!
Okay, yeah, and they wanted Magic, who is the captain, to take care of their son, which is fair. But then, like, why do it? Telepathically, why that weird smile?
And just the weirdness of what they're saying. Scott says, yes, great job. Jean says, proud of you, son. And then at the end, after Cyclops is like, I've got a plan, right? Which kind of makes sense. It's like, oh, are they going to, what Tyler's been wanting all along, are they going to crash Sword through a gate into Otherworld?
Yeah.
And then Jean just says, it must be done, which is like a little creepy. And I like it because it makes me read into Jean's intent. We know I love Jean Grey, and a lot of my reaction to her negatively in Dawn of X is like, I just don't feel like she's written with any dimension sometimes. She kind of just arrives and does her psychic thing and then leaves. And I think that for the same reason that I've liked her in a lot of X-Force, I just feel like she has dimension here. I like that Jean has secrets. I like that Jean has strategic ideas that are different than Cyclops' strategic ideas. It's interesting. So is this like the best chapter of X of Swords? No. But is it like internally just a really fascinating issue with a lot of questions? I think yes.
I mean, we kind of guessed that there's going to be another shoe that will drop. It's like, we are led to believe that this is a sword quest and then a sword fight. But I think somewhere in between something else is going to happen. And this might be like the very first, inkling of that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Freya.
It's been a while since we've heard from Freya.
No. I was just going to say, though, that it's like the other part of it was, I was kind of thinking, how is their plan connects to Sinister's plan?
Right, because this is about contingencies this week. Right. All three of them.
Right. So is that somehow connects as well? And what she learned, is it something to do with the past and like the future or something? I don't know. So to be honest, though, this issue felt like a prelude to something different. Like it didn't feel like a continuation of the story that we are reading, but it felt like a prelude to a different thing, which, I mean, you can say that, oh, that's a bad thing. But I found the issue to be really good. But the thing is, like, for this whole story, I thought it was a little bit weak.
No, that's true. Because, like, the question would be, like, how does this fit into, Ten of Swords? And
we don't know.
Because,
we don't know.
If it's a prelude to the sword series itself, then this shouldn't be here.
Right.
Right? I know what you mean.
Is there more Cable in X of Swords?
Just to follow up on that, like, we are going to see another issue of Hellions, although it's really close to the end. So maybe we're going to see the results of their little quest a little bit in something like Stasis before then. Who knows? Yeah. We are going to see another issue of Cable, but again, it's one of the final issues. It's issue number 19. So this, some of these plot points might not all unfurl for a while, and that's it for New Mutants in this crossover. We're not going to see New Mutants again until it's over. So there's, Doug clearly is going to be part of the main plot. Hellions and Cable maybe come back in their own issues, maybe come back in plots elsewhere. But we've run super long on this one, so I guess kind of like final thoughts. We clearly love this week, even though we had some nitpicks. Next week we come to the big two because they're written by the co-authors of X of Swords, Excalibur and X-Men.
And X-Men.
Neither of them my favorite series in Dawn of X. Any thoughts about what's to come next week? Freya's face.
And I
Fariha,
say that.
What do we just say to Emma? Your face. You seem like you could be excited, but your face is not telling me that at all.
Telling me about it. Like, and that's very true because, I love Jonathan Hickman. Like, if he asked me to marry him, I'll say yes right away. Like, I love him that much. And I am not a fan of X-Men, except for X-Men 6 and X-Men 7. Those are the two issues I absolutely love. But otherwise, I'm like, please. And then also same with Excalibur. I was not very enthusiastic about it, as they say it. And, so to me, I'm like, is it gonna be another, like, too many data page, like, just history lesson? We don't know.
And then next week is followed by X of Swords Stasis, which is the middle point, which is also written by Tini Howard and Jonathan Hickman. And then Jonathan Hickman leads off the following week in X-Men number 14. So we're up for a lot of Hickman. If you see me express anger, if I seem enraged, just be prepared for me to read 3 weeks of Jonathan Hickman comics and how that usually makes me feel, okay? I'm going to try to contain my emotions, but I'm giving you advance warning, both to my co-hosts and our viewership.
And I'm telling you that the man knows how to write stories, just not individual issues. Like, he really... and then also, like, he doesn't care about characters. Like, please, what are characters? I don't care either. But the thing is, like, it just, like... Overall, we talk about how great Docs has been, and that's his vision. But the thing is, individual issues, you're like, what are you saying, sir? But then you read it the whole together, then you're like, oh, now kiss me.
And that is what convinced Peter to read everything, because, to ignite Peter's interest in Docs, because he read everything and he's like, yeah, it's very tightly woven. And it's not all like, zombie X-Men written by Hickman, like, who doesn't speak like themselves. There are character works in them, like, written by different writers, who can handle things like that much better than Hickman.
Yeah, so we'll see. 3 weeks of Jonathan Hickman and Tini Howard coming up. Thank you so much, Tyler and Fariha, for coming into this with a lot of thoughts and nitpicks, so it wasn't just us gushing the whole time, because these were 3 remarkable issues of X-Men comic books.
Wait, before we go, can I say something?
Final thoughts from Tyler.
The reader, the riddle for choosing Doug as a champion, it says, out of one comes many, and into many comes one. And some people think it like, he's going to die, resurrect, and different dimensions get back to, he becomes pieces of different multiverse versions of him. But what if this is talking about Jimmy Maddox?
I think it's kind of talking about the Phalanx. Like, Warlock in most other dimensions is synonymous with the Phalanx because he's from that Technarchy race, and we know that that's an unexplored territory from Powers of X. Like, I don't know. I think it's so interesting that there's very specific potential bad news for each of the people who could die in the tournament, right? Like, what happens if Betsy dies and she's not Captain Britain anymore? What happens if Magic dies? Who's going to come through Magic from another reality? So I think that there's just, like, a lot of really interesting things to come. So thank you for watching and listening. Sound off below. Did you love these as much as we do? Do you think these are the pinnacle of comic arts like we do? Are you excited or have trepidation about Hickman and Howard next few weeks? And then finally, what do you think the future holds in store for poor Doug? This has been another issue of This Week in X episode. Who even knows at this point? Thank you so much for watching. And thank you, Tyler and Fariha, for joining me.